dumbest criminal you've ever seen. My ex-husband Derek broke into my house 4 times before I finally invested in a security system. Not to steal anything, just to prove he could. The first time, he moved all my furniture 2 inches to the left so I'd walk into everything in the dark. The second time, he unplugged my refrigerator and let everything spoil. The third time, he stood over my bed while I slept and took photos on his phone. I only knew because he texted them to me the next morning with a message that said, "You look peaceful when you dream." I could have done anything. The fourth time, he stole my daughter Mia's stuffed rabbit, the one she'd had since birth, and sent me ransom photos of it tied to a chair like some demented hostage situation. The police were sympathetic, but useless. Detective Paulson kept telling me to document everything, as if I wasn't already living in a constant state of documentation, as if my entire existence hadn't become a desperate attempt to prove my own reality to people who had the luxury of doubt. Get a security system, he suggested after the rabbit incident. One with cameras and remote monitoring. Make it impossible for him to claim he wasn't there. So I did. I spent $3,200 I didn't have on a Safeguard Solutions premium package with 12 cameras, motion sensors on every door and window, and a smart lock system that could be controlled from my phone. The technician who installed it was a guy named Kevin who looked at the fading bruises on my arms and didn't ask questions he already knew the answers to. Kevin spent 3 hours showing me how everything worked, but I was too exhausted to absorb most of it. Depression and hypervigilance don't mix well with technical instructions. He showed me the app, the arming sequences, the notification settings, the live feed access. I nodded like I understood while my brain cataloged everything that could go wrong. What if I set it off accidentally? What if the police stopped responding because I was the woman who cried wolf? What if Derek figured out how to disable it and I wouldn't even know until it was too late? Kevin must have sensed my overwhelm because he simplified everything down to the basics. Red button arms the system when you leave. Green button disarms it when you come home. If anything moves inside while it's armed, the police get called automatically. Simple enough, right? Except it wasn't simple at all. The first night, I set off the alarm at 2:17 a.m. by walking to the bathroom and forgetting the system was armed in stay mode, which apparently was different from away mode, and I'd mixed them up. The siren was loud enough to wake my 7-year-old daughter Mia, who came running into the hallway sobbing that Daddy had come back. I couldn't remember the disarm code. My hands were shaking so badly I kept entering the wrong numbers. The police called while the alarm was still screaming, and I couldn't answer because I was trying to shut it off and comfort Mia simultaneously. 2 officers showed up 8 minutes later looking annoyed to find a confused woman in pajamas apologizing profusely for the false alarm. Officer Denise Kim was patient about it. These systems take time to learn. You'll get the hang of it. But her partner, a younger guy named Officer Troy Baskin, couldn't hide his irritation. 4th false alarm we've responded to this week, ma'am. Maybe read the manual next time before you waste our resources. I wanted to explain about Derek, about why I needed the system, about why my brain wasn't working properly, but the words stuck in my throat. I just apologized again and promised it wouldn't happen again. Kevin from Safeguard called the next morning after getting an alert about the false alarm. He offered to come back and give me another tutorial, no charge. I told him I was fine, that I'd figured it out, even though I absolutely hadn't. The second false alarm happened 3 days later when I came home from dropping Mia at school and forgot to disarm the system before opening the front door. The shrieking started immediately, and I panicked, pressing buttons randomly on my phone until something worked. The police were already on their way by the time I got it silenced. Officer Kim showed up alone this time, and her patience had worn thinner. "Ms. Vance, you're going to get fined if this keeps happening. The city charges $150 for repeat false alarms. I know the system is new, but you need to take the time to learn it properly." I nodded and apologized and felt like the stupidest person alive. That evening, I tried to go through the manual Kevin had left, but the technical language made my eyes glaze over and my anxiety spike. The third false alarm was the breaking point. I'd been carrying groceries inside and set them down to disarm the system, but apparently there was a 60-second window and I'd taken 70 seconds and the alarm triggered anyway. This time, Officer Baskin responded with a partner I hadn't met before, and they were both openly hostile. "This is ridiculous, ma'am. If you can't handle a basic security system, maybe you shouldn't have one. You're pulling us away from real emergencies." The humiliation burned through my chest. I apologized and explained I was still learning and promised it wouldn't happen again. After they left, I sat on my kitchen floor and cried while Mia ate cereal for dinner because I couldn't pull myself together enough to cook. That night, I made a decision that would turn out to be either the luckiest or dumbest thing I'd ever done, depending on how you looked at it. I turned the system off. Not completely off because Derek still terrified me and I needed something between us. But I disabled all the motion sensors and alerts except for the cameras. The cameras would keep recording to the cloud storage, Kevin had explained, even if the alarm system was disarmed. So I'd still have footage if something happened, but I wouldn't trigger any more false alarms and humiliate myself in front of the police again. I didn't know how to check the cloud footage, but that seemed less important than avoiding another lecture from Officer Baskin about wasting city resources. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I went to work at the medical billing office where I processed insurance claims, came home to help Mia with homework, made dinner, enforced bedtime, and collapsed into my own bed, exhausted by the simple act of surviving another day. Derek stayed away, or at least I assumed he did. Without the motion alerts, I wouldn't know if he'd been in the house unless he left obvious evidence like he used to. I checked the locks obsessively and installed a chair under my bedroom door handle every night, but the security system sat dormant, its cameras recording whatever they recorded while I went about my life in ignorant peace. Then on a Thursday morning in October, I got a call from my bank that my credit card had been declined at the gas station. Impossible, I said. I'd just gotten paid, and there should have been plenty in my account. The customer service rep explained that someone had made a $3,800 charge at an electronics store in the city the previous afternoon. The purchase had triggered a fraud alert but was still processing. I felt sick. I hadn't made any purchases. I'd been at work all afternoon, and my card had been in my wallet the entire time. Except it hadn't been. When I checked, my wallet had my license and insurance card and a grocery store rewards card, but no credit card or debit card. I called the police non-emergency line and explained about the fraud, and the dispatcher said an officer would come take a report. Officer Kim arrived an hour later while I was frantically going through my purse and car looking for my missing cards. "When did you last use them?" she asked, pen poised over her notepad. "2 days ago at the grocery store. I know I put them back in my wallet. I always put them back in my wallet." Officer Kim asked if I'd had any visitors or workers in the house recently. Just the security system technician 3 weeks ago, and he was from a legitimate company. No one else. Had I noticed anything else missing or disturbed? No, but I wouldn't necessarily know. The house looked the same as always. And Officer Kim walked through my house with me, checking windows and doors for signs of forced entry. Everything looked intact. The smart lock on the front door showed no unauthorized access codes. The windows were all locked from the inside. If someone had broken in, they'd done it carefully enough to leave no trace. That's when I remembered the security cameras. The ones that had been recording everything for the past 2 weeks while the motion alerts were disabled. Officer Kim's expression shifted from patient to interested. "You have footage from inside the house? Show me." I pulled out my phone and opened the Safeguard app, navigating through menus I barely understood until I found the cloud storage archive. There were hundreds of video files, organized by camera location and date. I clicked on the one labeled Living Room, October 10th, which was the day before I'd noticed my cards missing. The footage loaded slowly, then played in jerky fast-forward until Officer Kim told me to slow it down. We watched me leave for work at 7:45 a.m., the house sitting empty and still. At 9:33 a.m., the front door opened. A man walked in. He was white, maybe 40, wearing jeans and a gray hoodie pulled low over his face. He moved through my house with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there, looking around like he was shopping. He went through my purse on the kitchen counter, pulled out my wallet, removed the cards, and put the wallet back. Then instead of leaving immediately like a normal burglar would, he started exploring. He opened my refrigerator and ate some leftover pizza directly from the container. He sat on my couch and used the remote to turn on the TV, scrolling through channels for several minutes before getting bored. He walked into Mia's room and looked through her toys, picking up her stuffed animals and tossing them aside like he was searching for something specific. He went into my bedroom and opened my dresser drawers, running his hands through my underwear in a way that made my skin crawl. Officer Kim was recording everything on her phone, documenting each violation. The burglar spent nearly 30 minutes in my house before heading toward my bathroom. Officer Kim and I watched in stunned silence as he pulled down his pants and sat on my toilet. The camera angle from the hallway caught everything in unfortunate detail. He sat there for at least 5 minutes, scrolling through what was probably my stolen credit card information on his phone. When he finished, he didn't flush. He pulled up his pants and walked toward my bedroom again. That's when something unexpected happened on the footage. The bedroom door closed behind him with a soft click, and we heard a mechanical lock engage. The smart lock system, which I'd forgotten was installed on the bedroom door as part of the premium package. The burglar tried the handle. It didn't open. He tried again, pulling harder. Still locked. On the video, we could hear him say, "What the fuck?" followed by increasingly panicked attempts to open the door. He pounded on it. He threw his shoulder against it. The smart lock didn't care. It had detected an unauthorized person in the bedroom, triggered by the motion sensor I'd forgotten to disable in that room specifically, and had automatically locked according to its programming. The burglar was trapped in my bedroom with no way out except the second-story window, which didn't open far enough for an adult to fit through thanks to safety locks I'd installed after Mia almost fell out as a toddler. Officer Kim stopped the video and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "So your security system has been recording this entire time, and it locked this guy in your bedroom? When did this happen?" I checked the timestamp. Yesterday afternoon, around 1 p.m., which meant he'd been locked in there for almost 24 hours, while I'd been going about my life completely unaware. Officer Kim called for backup immediately. She pulled her weapon and told me to stay behind her as we approached my bedroom. The door was still closed. She knocked and announced herself as police. No response. She tried the handle. Still locked. She told me to unlock it with my app. My hands shook as I navigated through the Safeguard interface, finding the smart lock controls and selecting my bedroom. I pressed unlock and heard the mechanism disengage. Officer Kim pushed the door open with her gun drawn. The smell hit us first. a nauseating mixture of body odor, desperation, and human waste. The burglar was sitting on my bedroom floor in the corner, his face pale and sweaty. He'd clearly tried everything to escape. My window was broken from the inside, glass on the floor where he'd smashed it trying to make an opening big enough to climb through. He'd torn apart my closet looking for tools or something to use as a weapon. He'd urinated in my wastebasket because apparently he'd needed to go again and couldn't get back to the bathroom. Officer Kim ordered him to show his hands and get on his face. He complied without resistance, probably grateful to be getting out of the room even if it meant getting arrested. She cuffed him while calling for additional units. The burglar started talking immediately, his voice hoarse from what must have been hours of shouting for help that never came. I just needed some money. I wasn't going to hurt anyone. I just needed the card numbers and I was going to leave. I've been stuck in here since yesterday. I thought I was going to die in here. No water, no food. I had to piss in a trash can. This is fucking insane. Your door is psychotic. Officer Kim told him to shut up and recited his Miranda rights while he lay on my bedroom floor crying. More officers arrived, including Officer Baskin, who I braced myself for more judgment from. But when Kim briefed him on the situation, his expression shifted to something like amazement. The security system locked him in automatically, and she had no idea? He looked at me with new interest, like I'd suddenly become competent instead of incompetent. How did you set that up? I admitted I hadn't set it up intentionally, that I'd been trying to disable the motion sensors but must have missed the bedroom one, and the smart lock had done its job without me knowing it existed. Baskin actually laughed. So you caught this guy by accident because you didn't know how to turn your system off properly? That's the dumbest luck I've ever seen. Or the dumbest criminal. They arrested the burglar, whose name turned out to be Curtis Vaughn, a repeat offender with 6 priors for burglary and theft. They found my credit cards in his pocket, along with 6 others from different victims. His phone had dozens of photos of credit cards and driver's licenses, evidence of identity theft affecting potentially hundreds of people. The $3,800 purchase at the electronics store had been a new laptop he'd planned to resell. They found my missing rabbit in his car, along with jewelry and personal items from other break-ins. Detective Paulson arrived to take my statement and couldn't stop shaking his head. Curtis Vaughn has been breaking into houses in this neighborhood for 6 months. We had no physical evidence, no witnesses, no way to catch him. He's smart enough to avoid leaving DNA or fingerprints, but he wasn't smart enough to avoid shitting in a house with security cameras, and he definitely wasn't smart enough to realize he'd locked himself in. The full footage from my security system became crucial evidence. The cloud storage had captured Curtis breaking into 3 other houses in my neighborhood over the past 2 weeks, using the same method of entering through front doors with a lock-picking tool during work hours when families were gone. He'd been patient and methodical, taking only credit cards and small valuables that wouldn't be immediately missed. But in my house, his confidence had betrayed him. The footage showed everything. Him eating my food, pawing through my belongings, sitting on my toilet scrolling through his phone, planning his next crime while literally caught with his pants down. Detective Paulson said it was the most comprehensive evidence package he'd ever seen for a burglary case. The part that made Curtis the dumbest criminal wasn't just getting locked in my bedroom. It was what he did while locked in there. The bedroom camera had recorded everything, and apparently Curtis hadn't noticed it. He'd spent hours trying to escape, getting increasingly frustrated and panicked. He'd called someone on his phone, probably an accomplice, but they must not have answered because he'd left voicemails detailing his exact location and situation. He'd literally created an audio confession describing multiple burglaries while trapped in my bedroom. When he'd realized he couldn't break the window open wider, he'd started going through my drawers again, this time stealing jewelry and photographing himself wearing it, apparently planning to claim it belonged to him if he was caught. The footage that sealed his fate came from the 18-hour mark of his captivity. Starving and thirsty and losing his mind from isolation, Curtis had started talking to himself. The camera picked up everything. He'd confessed to dozens of burglaries, complained about fences who'd cheated him on resale prices, named accomplices and criminal contacts, essentially providing police with a roadmap to an entire theft ring. Detective Paulson said Curtis had given them more information than most suspects did under interrogation, all because he'd spent nearly a full day locked in a room with a camera, thinking no one could hear him, gradually losing his sanity enough to talk himself through his own criminal history for comfort. The electronic store footage corroborated the credit card theft. Cameras there showed Curtis purchasing the laptop with my card just hours before getting locked in my bedroom. He'd signed my name on the receipt, not bothering to disguise his handwriting or face. He'd parked directly in front of the store entrance, his license plate visible in perfect clarity. He'd left a trail so obvious that investigators wondered how he'd avoided capture for months. The answer, apparently, was that he'd been careful and paranoid during the actual burglaries, but arrogant and sloppy afterward, confident that without being caught in the act, he was untouchable. My accidental security system had caught him in the act, and his own hubris had kept him there long enough for the evidence to become overwhelming. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diana Flores, called me to discuss the case. She said Curtis was being charged with 17 counts of burglary, 23 counts of identity theft, and various other crimes. The evidence from my security footage alone was enough to convict him several times over. She asked if I'd be willing to testify, and I said yes without hesitation. Diana explained that Curtis's public defender was trying to negotiate a plea deal, arguing that trapping someone in a room for nearly 24 hours constituted unlawful imprisonment. She laughed while telling me this. He broke into your house, stole your property, and got caught by your security system that was functioning exactly as designed. The fact that he was too stupid to realize he was locked in until it was too late isn't your problem. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after his arrest. I took the morning off work and wore my most professional outfit, wanting to look like someone who'd intentionally set a trap for criminals rather than someone who'd accidentally caught one through technological incompetence. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, and Curtis looked smaller too, diminished by an orange jumpsuit and the weight of overwhelming evidence. His public defender, a tired-looking man named Neil Thornton, argued that the security system footage should be suppressed because I hadn't properly understood how to operate it. Therefore, any recording it made was inadmissible. The judge, a woman in her 60s with zero patience for nonsense, shut that down immediately. Judge Patricia Langford asked Neil to explain exactly how not understanding security system settings made the footage inadmissible. Neil stammered something about expectations of privacy and unlawful surveillance. Judge Langford pointed out that Curtis had broken into private property and had no reasonable expectation of privacy while committing a crime. She'd reviewed the footage personally and found it both relevant and admissible. Moreover, she noted with barely concealed amusement, Curtis had provided a running commentary of his criminal activities while trapped, essentially testifying against himself. Neil argued that his client had been under duress from being locked in the room and his statements couldn't be considered voluntary. Judge Langford asked if breaking into someone's house, eating their food, stealing their credit cards, and defecating in their toilet seemed voluntary enough for him. The hearing lasted 90 minutes. Diana presented the footage, highlighting the most damning moments. Curtis entering my house, going through my purse, sitting on my toilet, getting locked in the bedroom, confessing to multiple crimes while trapped. The judge watched with an expression that shifted from professional neutrality to visible disgust to something approaching dark humor. When the footage showed Curtis wearing my stolen jewelry and photographing himself, Judge Langford actually put her head in her hands. The preliminary hearing was a formality, she said afterward. There's sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, though I suspect Mr. Vaughn's attorney will be advising him to take whatever plea deal is offered. This is the most open and shut case I've seen in 20 years on the bench. Curtis took the plea deal 2 weeks later. 15 years in state prison with possibility of parole after 10. He'd face additional charges in other jurisdictions for the burglaries my security footage had captured him planning. His accomplices, identified from the voicemails and his rambling confessions, were arrested and charged separately. The theft ring Detective Paulson mentioned was dismantled, leading to the recovery of stolen property worth over $200,000 from multiple victims. My credit cards were canceled and my accounts were protected, so I lost nothing except the sense of security that had already been destroyed by Derek months earlier. The $3,800 fraudulent charge was reversed. The bank even waived the replacement card fee after hearing about the case. The media picked up the story because of course they did. Dumbest criminal caught by security system he didn't know was recording. Made local news first, then regional, then somehow went viral on social media. A reporter from Channel 7 interviewed me in my living room, carefully framing shots to avoid showing my bedroom where Curtis had been trapped. I explained about Derek, about why I needed the security system, about my struggles to learn the technology, about accidentally catching a serial burglar. The reporter asked if I felt vindicated. I said I mostly felt tired. The attention was exhausting. People I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me with variations of, "I always knew you were smart," even though the entire situation had been caused by my technical incompetence. Kevin from Safeguard Solutions called to thank me for the publicity. Apparently, their sales had increased 40% after the story broke, with customers specifically requesting the exact setup I had. He offered to come give me a proper tutorial on the system, explaining all the features I'd been too overwhelmed to learn initially. I said yes because I genuinely wanted to understand the technology that had saved me. He spent 3 hours walking me through every setting, every alert option, every feature. This time I took notes and asked questions and actually absorbed the information. Kevin showed me how to check the cloud footage regularly, how to customize motion sensitivity, how to set the smart locks to work with my schedule instead of against it. The most useful feature, he explained, was one I'd never activated. The system could send me daily digest videos showing any motion detected while I was away. Just 30-second clips so I could quickly verify whether it was just the cat or actually a person. If I'd enabled that feature, I would have known Curtis was in my house the same day he broke in. But I also wouldn't have had 18 hours of footage showing him confessing to dozens of crimes. Sometimes incompetence has unexpected benefits, Kevin said with a slight smile, though I wouldn't recommend it as a long-term strategy. I agreed and promised to actually read the manual this time. Derek violated the restraining order again 3 weeks after Curtis's conviction. He showed up at Mia's school during pickup time, trying to talk to her before I arrived. The school called the police and me simultaneously. I got there to find Officer Kim putting Derek in handcuffs while Mia cried in the principal's arms. This time Derek was charged with criminal violation of protective order, a felony because it was his fifth offense. The prosecutor used my security footage from the earlier break-ins, the ones Derek had committed before I'd installed the system, as evidence of a pattern of stalking. Curtis's case had established the footage as reliable evidence, making it easier to use in Derek's prosecution. He took a plea deal for 3 years in prison, mandatory counseling, and a permanent restraining order. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The civil lawsuit came next. Diana Flores recommended a personal injury attorney named Rachel Kim, who specialized in domestic violence cases. Rachel filed suit against Derek for emotional distress, invasion of privacy, and damages related to his pattern of harassment. She used the same security footage that had convicted Curtis, showing Derek's break-ins and his threatening behavior. The footage of him standing over my bed while I slept was particularly compelling evidence. The jury awarded me $150,000 in damages, which Derek obviously couldn't pay, but Rachel explained that the judgment would follow him forever, garnishing any wages or assets he acquired after prison. It was a symbolic victory, but symbols mattered when you'd been made to feel powerless for years. Mia started therapy to process everything: Derek's abuse, the restraining order violations, Curtis's break-in that she'd slept through, the media attention that had made her feel exposed. Her therapist, Dr. Yolanda Banks, said Mia was resilient, but needed tools to manage anxiety that was developmentally appropriate. The security system actually helped, ironically. Knowing the house was monitored made Mia feel safer, and I finally understood the technology well enough to show her how it worked, demystifying it into something protective rather than scary. We made a ritual of checking the cameras together every evening before bed, verifying that all the doors and windows were secured, that we were safe in our home. The neighborhood changed after Curtis's arrest. The story had revealed how vulnerable we all were, how a patient burglar could exploit our daily routines. 6 other families installed security systems within the month. The neighborhood association started a group chat for reporting suspicious activity. Someone organized a self-defense class at the community center. We became more vigilant, more connected, more aware of the illusion of safety we'd been living under. Curtis had broken into 17 houses over 6 months without anyone noticing, until my malfunctioning security system accidentally caught him. How many other criminals were operating in our midst, smart enough to avoid the traps we didn't know we needed to set? Officer Baskin stopped by my house 3 months after the arrest, not for official business, but to apologize. He'd been one of the officers who'd responded to my false alarms with obvious irritation, who'd made me feel stupid for not understanding the technology. I see now why you needed the system. I'm sorry for being dismissive about the false alarms. You were dealing with a lot and I should have been more patient. I appreciated the apology even though it didn't change what had happened. He told me they were using my case in police training now, teaching officers to take domestic violence victims seriously, even when they seemed confused or incompetent, because trauma affects cognitive function, and people in crisis don't always present as competent. It was a small systemic change, but it mattered. The Safeguard Solutions company featured my story in their marketing materials after getting my permission. They were careful to focus on the technology rather than my personal trauma, emphasizing how their system worked even when users didn't fully understand it, how the cloud storage preserved evidence that led to convictions, how the smart locks could trap intruders through automatic protocols. They sent me a check for $5,000 as a thank you for the publicity. I used it to pay down credit card debt Curtis's fraud had created and to put some in savings for Mia's future. Money couldn't fix what had been broken, but it helped address the practical problems that trauma always brought along as unwelcome companions. A year after Curtis's arrest, I got a message from the parole board. Curtis was applying for early release after serving just 3 years of his 15-year sentence. Budget cuts and prison overcrowding meant nonviolent offenders were being released early to make room for violent ones. His attorney argued that he'd been a model prisoner, attending classes, expressing remorse, becoming a changed man. Diana Flores called to tell me I had the right to submit a victim impact statement opposing his release. I spent a week writing it, detailing not just what Curtis had done to me, but what he'd done to the 17 other families he'd burglarized, the hundreds of identity theft victims his phone records had revealed, the sense of violation that persisted long after physical evidence was cleaned up. The parole hearing was perfunctory. Curtis sat in prison video conference wearing a button-up shirt and an expression of practiced remorse. He apologized to me directly, saying he'd been in a dark place, addicted to drugs, making terrible choices. He'd found God in prison, completed his GED, started taking college courses online. He wanted to give back to the community he'd harmed. The parole board asked me to respond. I said Curtis was very good at performing contrition, but his crime hadn't been a momentary lapse in judgment. It had been a calculated pattern of violation over months. He'd stolen from 17 families, sat on my toilet scrolling through stolen credit card numbers, confessed to dozens of other crimes while locked in my bedroom. 3 years wasn't sufficient justice for that level of predatory behavior. The parole board denied his early release. Derek got out of prison after serving 22 months of his 3-year sentence, time reduced for good behavior. The permanent restraining order meant he legally couldn't come within 500 feet of Mia or me, but I knew from experience that paper barriers meant nothing to men who viewed women and children as property. I upgraded my security system again, adding more cameras, installing panic buttons in every room, connecting everything to a monitoring service that would dispatch police if I pressed the alarm. Kevin installed it all personally, refusing to charge me for labor. You've given my company enough free advertising. The least I can do is make sure you're actually safe this time. I learned every feature, tested every function, and taught Mia how to use the panic buttons if Daddy ever came back. He did come back, on a Saturday morning 4 months after his release. The doorbell camera caught him approaching the front door, looking thinner and older but with the same entitled anger in his expression. I pressed the panic button before he could knock. The alarm sent silent alerts to the police and the monitoring service. Derek stood on my porch ringing the doorbell, probably expecting me to answer so he could deliver whatever justification he'd prepared for violating the restraining order. Instead, 2 patrol cars arrived within 6 minutes. Officers found him still standing there, apparently confident that his presence was reasonable, that the restraining order was just another obstacle he had the right to ignore. They arrested him without incident. This time, the charge came with a mandatory 5-year sentence, no early release, for repeat violation of protective order with proven pattern of stalking. The security footage showed Derek had been watching my house from his car for 30 minutes before approaching the door, documenting his premeditation. His phone had searches for how to disable home security systems and restraining order enforcement in his browser history, proving he'd known he was violating the order and had researched ways to avoid consequences. The prosecutor used all of it to argue Derek represented a continuing threat that required maximum sentencing. The judge agreed. 5 years, every day of it, in a facility 4 hours away with minimal visitation rights. Mia wouldn't have to see him again until she was 14, old enough to tell the court she didn't want contact with the father who'd terrorized her mother and stolen her childhood's sense of safety. People ask me now if I'm grateful for the security system, and the answer is complicated. I'm grateful Curtis got caught. I'm grateful Derek is in prison where he can't hurt us. I'm grateful for the evidence that made both convictions possible. But I'm also angry that I needed a $3,200 security system to be safe in my own home, that police couldn't protect me until I could prove the threats were real, that my initial incompetence with the technology was what saved me because intentional competence hadn't been enough. The dumbest criminal I ever saw wasn't Curtis getting locked in my bedroom while taking a shit. It was a justice system that required women to become surveillance experts in their own homes before it would take their fear seriously. Curtis got out after serving 11 years, his full sentence minus time off for good behavior. He was 51 by then, worn down by prison and whatever demons had driven him to burglary in the first place. A friend who worked in the prosecutor's office told me he moved to another state, started working construction, stayed out of trouble as far as anyone knew. I hoped he'd actually changed, that 11 years had been enough time to become someone different. But I also knew that people rarely transformed in prison, that the system mostly just delayed harm, rather than preventing it. Derek would get out eventually too, and I'd have to decide whether to believe whatever change he claimed to have undergone, or whether to trust the patterns I'd already seen. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.